If you work in or around project management, you've probably heard things like, project plans are a waste of time, or plans always change, so why bother? Those kinds of mistaken ideas get repeated a lot, especially by people who've been burned by overcomplicated planning tools or rigid project templates. But in the real world of projects, those assumptions usually lead to delays, confusions, and rework. After years of managing and consulting on projects across industries, I can tell you a lot of what people believe about project planning just doesn't hold up. So in this video, we're going to break down the most common project planning myths and talk about what actually works when it comes to setting your project up for success. And make sure you stay tuned to the end because I'm going to share the single biggest mistake teams make when it comes to planning, and I'll tell you how to avoid it. Myth 1, project planning takes up too much time. We just need to get started. This is one of the most common misconceptions I hear, especially when project timelines are tight. There's this belief that sitting down to plan is a luxury we can't afford. So instead, teams jump straight into execution thinking they'll save time. But here's the reality. Skipping planning doesn't make your project faster. It makes it riskier. When you skip planning, you're also skipping alignment, clarity, and agreement on how you'll deliver. And when those things are missing, you start to see it play out in miscommunication, duplicated efforts, unclear roles, and a general sense of spinning in circles. I've seen projects lose weeks, even months, trying to course correct on things that a solid planning session could have cleared up in one afternoon. Project planning doesn't have to mean locking down every detail. Just means taking the time to 1, clarify your project priorities, 2, define your scope, 3, understand your risks, 4, set realistic expectation, and 5, get your team on the same page. It's an investment in momentum because when everyone is clear on what needs to happen and in what order, your project runs smoother. And that saves more time than rushing ever could. So, what actually works? I always recommend starting with a focused project planning session that defines scope, aligns your team, and surfaces risks early. On bigger project, I will sometimes do this over a course of a couple of weeks. At the very least, you want to spend a few hours clarifying your project goals, priorities, scope, timeline, and deliverables. This helps clarify everything for all project stakeholders and sets clear expectations, and it can save you weeks of confusion and rework down the road. One of the best places to do this is in a project charter. It helps keep everyone aligned on your project's purpose, scope, success criteria, and key players right from the beginning. If you're not exactly sure how to get started, this is exactly the kind of foundational project planning we walk through in my SLAY project management course. It's also built to give you a clear, repeatable framework that saves time, prevents missteps, and sets your project up for success right from day one. While we're talking about project myths, if you run projects, be sure to get my guide on how to avoid the 10 most common mistakes I see project managers make. I'll put the link below. Myth 2, a detailed plan guarantees project success. This one trips up a lot of teams, especially those who are trying to do things right. The idea is if we just plan every detail, map out every task, and build the perfect schedule, then nothing can go wrong. But in real projects, that's unfortunately not how it works. I've seen incredibly detailed project plans, beautiful timelines, complex dependencies, color-coded Gantt charts that completely fell apart once the project got underway. Why? Because the plan didn't adapt when reality changed. And reality changes always. A stakeholder shifts direction, a key resource becomes unavailable, a new requirement pops up midstream, and the list goes on. A detailed plan can be useful, but it's not a guarantee of success. It's a tool, and like any tool, it only works if you know when to use it and when to adjust. The real skill isn't building a perfect plan, it's managing change without losing focus. So, what actually works? Create a clear, flexible plan that sets direction and priorities, and then pair it with regular reviews, strong communication, and the ability to pivot when needed. A tool like the work breakdown structure is incredibly useful here. Start by breaking major tasks down with your subject matter experts, then map out high-level timing. You might use a schedule like a Gantt chart to do that. Just don't be afraid to adjust as reality shifts. Myth 3, once the plan is approved, we're done. This myth is subtle, but it's kind of dangerous. It's a belief that once the project plan is created and signed off, the planning phase is complete and we can shift fully into execution. But real project management doesn't work like that. A plan is not a one and done document. It's a living, working guide that needs to be revisited and adjusted as the project evolves. I've seen teams go months without opening their original plan, only to realize they've drifted way off course. Deadlines have shifted and deliverables have changed, but the team is still referencing a document that hasn't been updated since kickoff. That's not project planning. That's pretending. A plan should stay visible and useful throughout the entire project. It should be part of your regular check-ins, steering committee meetings, and decision making. It's there to help guide trade-offs, track progress, and surface issues early, not to sit in a file that no one opens. So what actually works? Treat your plan like a GPS, not a paper map. Keep it visible, revisit it often, and adjust your course as needed. Your scope statement is critical here. It gives you a solid baseline to return to when things drift. And regular plan reviews help you catch issues early, especially when paired with risk logs and change control tool. Myth 4, the more detailed, the better the plan. This myth can sneak in when teams feel pressure to prove their plan is solid. So what they do is they go really, really deep, planning down to the hour, the task, the subtask of the subtask. But what happens when you do that is you end up locking yourself into a plan that's too rigid, too early. And when change comes, which it always does, it is harder to adapt. One company I consulted with had a team that spent weeks building an incredible detailed work breakdown structure before the project had even been fully scoped. And within 2 weeks of starting, major assumptions had changed, but the team was so invested in their original plan that they really struggled to shift. That caused delays, frustration, and a lot of duplicated effort. Early stage project planning should focus on structure and clarity, not perfect precision. You can always add details as things unfold. But if you start with too much too soon, you risk wasting time on things that won't even be relevant later. That is why it's a live document that you revisit all the time. So what actually works? Start with structure, then layering detail as the project becomes clearer. I recommend building a high-level WBS first, then using a collaborative session with your team to turn it into an action plan during your kickoff. That way, you'll get buy-in, realistic task durations, and a clear view of what actually is achievable without locking yourself into a false precision too soon. Myth 5, we don't need a plan. Our team already knows what to do. Oh, this one often comes from confidence and sometimes from experience. But it's still a trap. I've heard this from teams who've worked together before, who've actually delivered similar projects in the past, or who just feel like planning is overkill. The assumption is, we're smart, we're capable, let's just get on with it. Okay, But even the most experienced teams need a plan. Not because they don't know what they're doing, but because assumptions lead to gaps. Just because everyone thinks they know what needs to happen doesn't mean that they're all aligned on all the details, the timelines, responsibilities, priorities, or risks. I was once brought to help course correct on a project. The team had worked together before, so they had skipped most of the project planning steps. I came in halfway through the project and people were moving around in all different directions. Tasks were duplicated, deliverables were delayed, and they spent more time realigning than they would have spent on a plan in the first place. So, what actually works? Use planning as a tool to confirm alignment and remove guesswork. Even experienced teams need a shared roadmap. I use a priority matrix to help clarify what's fixed and what's flexible when it comes to scope, time, and budget. When those are clearly defined, instead of letting stakeholders make assumptions, you eliminate a lot of confusion later on. Myth 6. Project planning is a project manager's job alone. This myth creates a lot of friction and usually results in a frustrated project manager and a disengaged team. Project managers often feel like they're carrying the entire plan on their shoulders, while the rest of the team waits to be told what's happening. But that's not a collaborative process, though. That's a recipe for resistance. And the truth is, if the team doesn't help shape the plan, they won't feel ownership over it. And that lack of ownership shows up in missed deadlines, poor communication, or resistance to change. People are far more likely to commit to a plan they had a hand in building. I've seen this firsthand. I've worked with teams where just bringing everyone into a 1 hour planning session made a huge difference. People asked better questions, raised risks earlier, and helped refine and schedule based on real constraints, not just what looked good on paper. So it actually works. It might seem like you're the one accountable for your project, but in reality, as a project manager, your job is to start the project planning process, not finish it alone. Begin by drafting a baseline plan that outlines the project structure, scope, and major phases. Then get input and approval from your sponsor and steering committee to make sure the direction aligns with business goals. Next, work with subject matter experts to break down deliverables into detailed components using a work breakdown structure, also known as a WBS. This ensures technical accuracy and realistic timelines. Finally, bring the whole team together at the kickoff meeting to walk through the plan, gather input, and turn it into a working action plan everyone understands and supports. The more your team is involved in shaping the plan, the more invested they'll be in delivering it, and the stronger your plan will be. Myth 7, steering committee members don't need to be involved in the project planning phase. The steering committee can feel like a wild card, especially if they're busy, hard to pin down, or tend to change their minds. So it's easy to think, let's just build the plan and loop them in later. But skipping their involvement during project planning almost always backfires. I've seen projects where the team spent weeks building a beautiful plan, only to present it and hear, that's not what we had in mind. Or worse yet, they don't hear that until halfway through the project when it's much harder and more expensive to change course. When the steering committee isn't involved early, you risk misaligned goals, missing requirements, and approvals that get delayed or denied. And when that happens, your project slows down, burns more resources, and loses trust. So, what actually works? Bring the steering committee in early by having them review the scope statement and the project charter and the high-level items in your WBS action plan. Just to be clear, you don't need to show them every detail, but you do need their alignment on the big picture before you start executing. Their input can clarify priorities, expose hidden risks, or flag misalignments before they become costly. And the earlier you align on success criteria, the fewer surprises you'll hit later on in the project. Myth 8, you can't plan for uncertainty. This sounds reasonable at first. After all, how do you plan for something you can't predict? But in project management, uncertainty isn't a surprise. It's a guarantee. And pretending you can't plan for it is one of the biggest missed opportunities I see on projects. I've worked with companies where the team had left no room for the unknown. Their plan looked great on paper until something shifted. A key resource got pulled on another initiative, a vendor missed a deadline, a scope change came in from the sponsor, and because they hadn't built in any flexibility, the entire project got thrown off track. You don't need a crystal ball to plan for uncertainty. You just need the right tools, buffers in your timeline, contingency in your budget, and a clear risk planning from the start. These are signs of poor project planning. They're signs of smart, proactive leadership. So, what actually works? A good plan doesn't assume everything will go perfectly. It accounts for what could go wrong and gives your team options when it does. Planning for uncertainty doesn't remove risk, but it gives you the ability to respond with confidence instead of scrambling to react. In my project planning sessions, I always build in risk management planning. We identify potential risks, assess their impact, and build mitigation plans up front. I also use scheduled buffers and budget contingencies where it makes sense. These aren't signs of poor planning. They're signs that you're planning for the real world. Myth 9, we'll figure it out as we go. This one might be the most damaging of all, and it's completely at odds with how successful projects are run. I've heard teams say, we don't have the time to plan. We'll figure it out along the way. And while it may or might sound flexible, it usually leads to chaos. Figuring it out means making critical decisions without context, redoing work, and wasting time chasing clarity that should have been built in from the start. That's not flexibility, that's firefighting. And it causes and creates stress, missed deadlines, and frustrated teams who are just trying to do their job without a roadmap. So, what actually works? The most effective project teams don't wing it. They work from a standardized framework that is clear, repeatable, and scalable. That's why I created the SLAY project management course to help project managers and their teams stop guessing and start delivering with confidence. It's built around what actually works in real-world project environments. It gives you practical, proven tools like clear project planning structure, stakeholder alignment strategies, risk management planning, and change control, all grounded in real project experience. No fluff, no jargon, just what works. If you're tired of reinventing the wheel every time, SLAY sets you up and your team with the information, templates, and guidance you need to run projects smoothly from start to finish. Remember what I said at the beginning of this video to stay tuned to the end. This is why. Because the biggest myth of all is thinking you'll just figure it out as you go. You don't need to. And frankly, you deserve better. What's great about SLAY is it shows you exactly how to make that happen. Now that you know how to stop falling for project management myths, you need to know what project mistakes to avoid. I've written a checklist on how to avoid project failure. I'll put the link below this video. If you still have questions about project planning, I break down some of the top planning tools in this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this video helpful. I'd be grateful if you gave this video a thumbs up. See you at the next video.